Stacy Sims, and I'm the founder of City Silence and the True Body Project. And I'm really excited to be sitting here today with Brad Warner, who is a Sōtō Zen priest and author of 5 books, with the 6th one coming out in March, and also a punk rock bass guitarist, and a handful of other things.
Yeah, a bunch of other things.
And so, Brad, we're here in Cincinnati, Ohio. So, share a little bit why are you in Cincinnati?
Why am I in Cincinnati? Well, I got invited by Ted Nelson, who runs an organization, or is part of an organization, I don't know if he runs it, called Concert Nova, and they're doing some kind of a retrospective on John Cage. I've seen the program, but I haven't actually seen what it is. I won't see what it is till this evening. And because John Cage was very involved in Zen, Ted wanted me to come and be part of this program and talk about the Zen aspects of Cage's music. So that's why I'm here.
And I got to sit with you last night, where you did a mini workshop about Zen and Zazen. And so you are from Ohio.
Yeah, originally, yeah.
From Akron.
Yeah.
And your first book, Hardcore Zen, documents your journey from a punk rock kid through
to a punk rock adult.
To a punk rock adult.
Who does Zen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about your how you got started?
Yeah. I kind of came across Zen by accident. I was a student at Kent State University, and I signed up for a class called Zen Meditation. I didn't know what the class was going to be. It was one of those moments when you have a certain number of credit hours you need to be a full-time student, and I didn't have enough, so I'm looking through the catalog for something to make me a full-time student, and Zen Buddhism is what I found. So I didn't really put a lot of thought into it. It wasn't like I was searching for meditation or anything like that. And I got into this class, and the teacher, who's this guy named Tim McCarthy, really impressed me, and Zen really impressed me. I was playing bass in a punk band called Zero Defects at the time, which I'm still playing in, and I was very committed to the punk rock thing, but I was getting a little wary of it because I found it was getting a little stuck in a rut. And when I discovered Zen, my first impression of Zen was, this is the most punk rock thing I've ever encountered in my life. You know, for the sake of the punk rock thing was all about questioning society and questioning the received wisdom, you know, of your elders and how things are done in the status quo and all of that. And I felt like Zen did that too. They did that, but they added to it questioning yourself and questioning what is the very nature of reality. And I thought, oh, this is taking it several steps further, and that's really interesting. And the attitude, I thought, was also quite similar. There's a kind of a weird thing that's happened these days where people, I don't know why, but people aren't aware of Zen's iconoclastic roots anymore. I think it's because there's a lot of magazines in the spiritual supermarket out there that promote this sort of cleaned up ideal of what a Buddhist is supposed to be, and people aren't aware that the Zen stream has always been kind of this horrible punk rock bad boy brother, you know, to the rest of the Buddhists.
Yeah, it must be an interesting thing to study, because you, in one hand, you want to honor and understand their traditions, while at the same time, if you're accurately being a hardcore Zen person, you would be questioning them.
Well, I mean, the whole point of the tradition is a tradition of questioning. It's always been that way. For my favorite example of that is there's a excuse me. There's a sutra called the Heart Sutra. That's the main sort of text for Zen Buddhists, and it's, when you print it out in English, it's about 3/4 of a page, so it's very short. But part of what happens in that sutra is there's this list of no's. So No suffering, no cause, no origination, no path. This is one of the lines in it. And that line is really important because the very first thing Buddha ever said after he decided to sort of try to teach his way to people was the truth of suffering, the truth of the origination of suffering, the truth of the cause, the truth of the path. No suffering, no origination, no cause. Yeah, the truth of the cause of suffering and the truth of the path to relieve suffering. And so it's almost as if somebody discovered this secret passage in the Bible that says no Savior, no crucifixion, no resurrection, no God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you're going, wait a minute, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people who aren't familiar with the tradition will kind of pass that over and not realize that this is actually a tradition that denies itself.
Mm.
You know, that actually denies its own canon. You know, which I think is amazing about it.
So then I guess that gives rise to one of the reasons why, in reading your first book, that's the book I've read, and also listening to you last night, is the importance of the practice of Zazen.
Yeah.
To, it means to you almost everything.
Well, that's really what it all boils down to. Zen is a form of Buddhism, and Buddhism has a kind of clerical tradition. I guess clerical is the word, but you know, a tradition of temples and texts and robes and all of that stuff exists within the Buddhist tradition and exists within the Zen Buddhist tradition. But the main thing that really differentiates Zen from the most other forms of Buddhism is that it takes as its starting point only meditation, because what Buddha actually taught, the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama, the original guy 2,500 years ago, he taught meditation, and there were no texts and there were no special clothes and anything like that during his time. So what he taught was meditation, and what the focus in Zen is always on meditation. So you can get rid of everything else, but you still need the meditation part of it.
I love what you said last night. One of the things you were sharing is that you're noticing that now mindfulness is becoming more of a commodity,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the ways that people are asked to engage or to begin a sort of a mindful or meditation practice is a lot of focus on what you do with your mind.
Yeah.
And if you would share what you shared about the organs and...
Oh yeah, well, basically the mindfulness has become such a big commercialized deal that I don't even use the word if I can avoid it. I don't even use the word mindfulness anymore because I'm just tired of hearing it. But when you are taught how to do Zazen, if you go to a Japanese, sort of normal Japanese Zen temple, they don't even really teach you. You know, you might find a very kind monk who will show you the steps, but basically they're like, here's what we're all doing, you can see what we're all doing, do that. You know, and that's it. You know, they won't even tell you that, they'll just show you where to go, you know. So the focus is very much on what you do with your body. In the Zen instructions, for example, Dogen, who founded the Sōtō Zen sect in Japan, when he gives his Zazen instructions, he only talks about posture, and he says 2 lines about what to do with your mind, which is, think the thought of non-thinking, it is different from thinking. That's how much he tells you about what to do with your mind. But the Shunryu Suzuki, who was the guy who founded the San Francisco Zen Center, said this thing that I really love, so I repeat it all the time, which is that your mind is just an organ in your body. So what Suzuki said is your stomach is there in the middle of your body, and it secretes stomach acid. That's what it does. Your mind is up there in your head, and it secretes thoughts. And there's no real reason why we pay so much attention to the action of this one particular organ in while ignoring all the rest of them. You know, you might as well be obsessively focused on what your stomach is doing or what your kidneys are doing or what your spleen is doing. That would make just as much sense. human beings have a lot invested in what our brains can do, because when we were wild animals on the African savannah, the only thing we really have going for us that gives us any advantage over any other animal is our ability to kind of reason through a problem. Otherwise we're just meat. That's all we are. We're just meat for other bigger animals. But as long as we kind of work on our brain power, we can elevate ourselves out of that situation. And what's happened evolutionarily is we've gone way beyond that, to where we've become a completely unique sort of thing on the earth now. And a lot of that has to do with this sort of obsessive concentration on our brains, but this also brings with it a lot of problems. And it turns out we probably don't need to worry about what our brains are doing that much. You can still do all the things that are necessary for survival, and even more than survival, without just spending most of your waking hours sort of concerned about what's happening up in your head. So that's kind of what we're trying to work through with Zen practice, is to get quiet enough that we're not just up there in our heads all the time.
So in a couple minutes, I'm going to ask you to give more guidance than we might get if we went to a traditional temple. So
Okay.
a little bit more about how to
Sure.
to practice Zazen if we so choose, and then we're going to practice together, which may be completely thrilling or completely boring.
It's usually boring.
Watch, yeah, but people will be able to meditate with you, which is
Okay.
pretty cool. But I was curious about a couple things. What is it that, so you've been meditating for 30 years now.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
And-
older than I look.
Yeah, I know, and I think it's probably because you meditate. That's what
I don't know.
That's what I'm going to go with. What is it that it does for you now?
Well, the famous Zen answer to that is Zazen is good for nothing. This is Kodo Sawaki. Was my I've had two main teachers, one in Japan and one in America, and the Japanese teacher was a student of Sawaki's, and he was very fond of that saying. So the idea is that this is a practice without a goal, which is really the number one hardest thing for anybody to get, including myself, about Zen practice, is that there just isn't a goal to it. So one of the things that happens to me, since I have a blog and a presence on the internet, is I constantly get emails, and really almost once a week, maybe sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, I'll get an email from somebody who's read one of my books and says, I've been doing Zazen and blah, 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 blah happens, am I doing it wrong? And the blah, blah, blah part is always different for each email, but really the answer is always the same. No, you're not doing it wrong. If you're doing it at all, you're doing it right. So it doesn't. We're not trying to get to some special state. People get frustrated. They're doing their practice, and there's no clouds parting and Buddha coming down with his, golden finger and touching you on the nose, or whatever they expect. Yeah, whatever they expect is going to happen, isn't happening. So they wonder if they're doing it wrong. But we're actually, it's good for nothing. So I do feel, though, I've done it for 30 years, so there must be some reason. And it's harder and harder for me to say why. I can say that when I first started out this practice, my kind of way of understanding my life was sort of like boring, 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 exciting moment, boring, 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 exciting moment, boring, boring, really sad moment, boring, 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 like that. And I kind of looked at that and realized I'm missing most of my life. Because I'm focusing on these little peak moments and peak experiences here and there, and missing all of the rest of it. Because I'm just kind of like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm just waiting for a bus, so I don't have to. But this practice has kind of given me the ability to kind of pay attention to, standing around waiting for a bus, or washing the dishes, or just doing, cleaning the cat box, or these things that you do that you don't really pay attention to because they're not the important things. And I really feel like that's opened up just this huge thing that I can't even begin to describe. How great it is just to kind of be able to stay with these things, because it's like this amazing parade of greatness is going by, and most of us are totally missing it because we think it's not
the exciting, or it's not.
It's not exciting. It's not terribly sad. And what we'll do, the internet is especially good for this, I've found, is when things are boring, people will just invent exciting things that'll happen. That's what this is my view of what international terrorism is about. Everything is too boring, so let's light something on fire or blow up a building. And really you just kind of, if you kind of stay with your life, you find you don't need to do those kind of things anymore. You don't need to go on Facebook and insult your best friend or whatever it is that you're doing, just to goose up your bit of excitement.
Well, that's a perfect segue into perhaps the book that's coming out in March.
Yeah.
So before you tell us about Zazen practicing, tell us about the book that's coming out.
Well, the title is Don't Be a Jerk.
There you go.
So, and it is, the origins of it are, I was with a friend of mine in a comic book shop, and we came across this book. She discovered it, called God is Disappointed in You. And what it is that this guy has taken the entire Bible and paraphrased it in his own words. And he's come to the conclusion that the message of the Bible is God is disappointed in you. But it's a really funny book, and it's not making fun of the Bible or just doing anything like that. It's just taking it and kind of boiling it down to here's what the stories are, and you can just kind of read them easily. And my friend said, maybe I should do that with Shobo Genzo. And Shobo Genzo is this 800-year-old book that I often talk about, which was written by Dogen, who's the guy who founded the sort of the style of Zen that I do. He brought it over to Japan from China, and in China it was extremely minor, so he kind of made it into something much bigger that way. And so I decided, okay, well, I'll see if I can do this with Dogen, and I can just boil it down to something that's the essence of this very lofty philosophical work. And this is the year, well, it'll come out in 2016, so I feel like this is the first time that has been, at least for English language speakers, something that anyone can do. Because now there are, I think, 4 different legitimate translations of Shobo Genzo that you can find in English, and they're fairly good. My teacher's is the best one. I'm biased though, but there's 3 others that are also good ones. So I thought, well, I'll just cut to the chase. And the reason it's called Don't Be a Jerk is Dogen has a chapter called in Japanese Shoaku Makusa, which means don't do wrong things. And there's a whole grammatical story for why that's the title. But I took that chapter and I realized what he's saying is the best way to enact Buddhist morality is just stop being a jerk. Just don't. He kind of says the best way to. He says there's no good or evil in the world as things that have to be avoided or chased after. It's just what you do. Mm-hmm. So if you want there to be less evil in the world, just don't be a jerk. Just
hold
don't.
Them
yeah.
Midline.
Don't do those things.
Right, and I think we all know.
Yeah.
Isn't the idea that we do know?
Well, it's perfectly obvious. There's a story actually comes up in that chapter where a guy says to a Zen master, "What's the essence of Buddhism?" And he says, "Just do right, don't do wrong." And the guy says, "Well, even a 4-year-old child knows that." And he says, "Well, yes, a 4-year-old child knows that, but even an 80-year-old man," which is the age of the Zen master, who's saying this, has trouble practicing it.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody knows it, but we have trouble doing it. So the basic thing is moment by moment, when you have a choice of doing the right thing or doing something that's not quite right, do the right thing, or at least just avoid doing the one that you can feel intuitively is the bad thing to do, is the disruptive or angry thing or any of that. So you just kind of don't do those things.
And I know, I mean, my meditation practice is much more recent and not as yet as full as yours daily practice is. But I do know that since I've deepened my practice and meditate every day, I am just far less likely to be a jerk.
Yeah, that happens. It just you start to see how your actions are affecting you, and the idea of being a good person no longer becomes, I'm going to practice and be a good person. You know, this kind of lofty ideal. It's that I am happier if I continue doing the right thing, it's a kind of almost. I think of it as sort of a rational selfishness. You know, the best thing that you can do for yourself is the best thing you can do for everybody else. And once you kind of see that, you go, okay, well, I'm just going to do that then.
Mm-hmm. And for me, a little bit of getting self out of the way. I can recede a little bit more and just be more present to other people, which is a luxury both for me as well as hopefully create space for someone else. So how about you, so now what's going to happen is Brad is going to share with you some of the techniques that are the more traditional ways of practicing Zazen, with all the little caveats that a nice Buddhist priest gives you.
Sure.
Right? Do this or not is what I heard,
When you approach the cushion, you come up to your cushion and you make a bow towards your cushion, and you turn around to your right and make a bow away from the cushion. And then you'll sit on the cushion and you rotate until you're facing the wall. This is a tradition that you do in a temple, and the reason for it is usually the space is limited. So if everybody, unless everybody turns around the same direction, they're going to run into each other. So that's why we always turn to the right and do the bows to the right. Once you're sitting down, there are a few traditional positions. The most popular in the United States happens to be the half lotus, and normally you also do it with your feet and your head uncovered. I tend to just put my socks underneath the cushion like this. So you're sitting in half lotus. The full lotus is a little bit more complicated. It's also quite a popular one, but basically, if you can do the full lotus, you don't need me to explain to you how to do the full lotus. So I'm not going to explain how to do it. You should consult a yoga teacher or something like that if you've never done it before and you have trouble doing it. It's not necessary. That's the sort of more traditional one, the full lotus. So the half lotus is easier for most people. And then you put your hands in what's called the Cosmic Mudra, which is your right hand is, if you're doing one of these lotus positions, your right hand is resting on your, heel. And your left hand is on top of that. And what it ends up being is you're making this little circle encircling your belly button, basically. And just holding it there. And your back is straight, your shoulders are down, your chin is slightly tucked in, and we also sit with the eyes open. This is different from a lot of styles of meditation where they sit with eyes closed. And the reason for that is we're facing a wall, which is a boring thing to look at. You don't want to face a really interesting looking wall because that would kind of defeat the purpose. Usually try to find a white wall or a wooden wall or something that doesn't have a lot of distractions. But we keep the eyes open because we are acknowledging and allowing the outside world to be part of our practice. So we're not trying to shut it out and get into our heads. We're actually trying to engage the outside world. However, we're looking at a wall, which is boring, quite frankly. It is honestly watching paint dry. So that's what you're actually doing. It's not even
that interesting.
Yeah, it's not even as interesting because the paint is usually already dry.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sitting like this, and you're keeping your shoulders and your back straight, and your eyes open, and just kind of like this. It's really, really simple. And as far as mentally, you're not trying to get somewhere. You're not trying to establish some perfectly quiet state. Kodo Sawaki also said, when he wasn't saying Zazen is good for nothing, he said the only time your mind is a complete blank is when you're dead. So you're not trying to find this completely blank mind. You're not trying to find oneness with the universe. You're not trying to find any of that. You're just sitting. As much as possible, you make an effort to let go of the thoughts that do come up. So there's a Korean teacher named Sung-san who had this metaphor of opening the hand of thought, which is as if you're grasping thoughts in your hand, but instead of doing that, you just open your hand and just let them all dribble out. So don't hold on to them, but don't worry. If a thought comes up, that doesn't mean you've ruined your practice. If you're obsessing about something for 7.5 minutes, you haven't ruined your practice. You just notice that you've been obsessing about something, and if you have, your body will have responded to that. So what usually happens to me is my shoulders go up like this, and I'm obsessing about a telephone call I have to make this evening or something like that. And my shoulder has gone up, and I go, oh, my shoulder went up. I'll just relax, and then carry on. So we sit, the normal thing within the Sōtō sect is to sit for 30 or 40 minute periods. In the Rinzai sect of Zen, they sit for 25-minute periods. So if you're just beginning, you can do 10 minutes or 5 minutes. It's, I think, very important to do it daily. If you really want to enter into this, what you should be doing is doing it every day. Don't even give yourself a day off, just do it every day. But if you don't have a lot of time on a particular day to do it, just do it for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or a minute. It's better than doing it. It's better than not doing it at all. Just keep it up as a daily practice. And that's when you start to find how the practice works. That's how it becomes useful.
And I think one of the other, you said many intriguing and I thought useful things when I got to listen to you last night and in your book. But I also felt it was in a way encouraging, while perhaps at the same time discouraging, to understand that there are often times, even for you, as someone who's been doing it for 30 plus years, where it's not as though it's a always blissy practice.
No, definitely not.
Hips might get agitated. You might feel really eager for the time period to end. And that is a part of the rigor.
That's just how it goes. And there's a lot of things that are happening beyond your control. People kind of have this idea of something magical happening. Like I saw some study recently which was claiming, the headline was screaming that meditation practice is no better for you than sitting in an easy chair drinking a beer or something like that. And I suppose if you check the galvanic skin response or whatever of random meditators and even out the scores and whatever, you might be able to reach that conclusion, but that's not what we're working on. We're actually working on getting deeply into whatever state is going on. So if you just had a really hairy, hard day at the office and you come back to do your meditation, it's not going to be as nice as the meditation that you have on a day when things have been going really well. But it's important to just keep sitting with that, and that's how the practice benefits you. I run into people all the time who get very excited about meditation for a couple of months, and then they hit a rough patch because they've had a fight with their boyfriend or whatever it is that's going on, and then it's like all like this, and they're going, wow, meditation isn't doing me any good. But that's when meditation is actually doing you some good. That's the point where you should double up on it, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to practice Zazen. Is that the sit Zazen, or what is the...
Sit. Yeah, we just call it sitting, really. I mean, the shikantaza is the word, and it means just sitting.
So we're going to just sit with Brad Warner now. And so I probably won't have time after we sit to properly thank you for allowing this video interview. So
well, thank you for interviewing me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And thanks.